Today I want to talk to you about grief, and I know that you can experience grief for any different reason. There can be the grief of losing someone that you love to death, or you can lose someone because maybe they decided that they didn't want to stay with you or that you didn't want to stay with them. Right now, I want to talk about the latter. What happens when you lose someone because the relationship went towards a breakup or the friendship went towards a breakup? How do you deal with it? How do you handle all of the emotions, the deep emotions that you feel inside? That's what we're going to be talking about. Because you don't get along with them anymore, because they fell out of love with you, because you fell out of love with them, because they understand that they're not the right person for you, because you can't see eye to eye, because you're constantly fighting and you can't get along anymore. Any type of loss that happens because of those things. And of course, you know that the list of things can be a mile long of why people break up in relationships and friendships. It's devastating. It's devastating. It breaks your heart. And sometimes we don't know how we're going to move forward. And all that we're thinking about is the pain that we're feeling inside, how much we miss that person, how much they meant to us. And it's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. And in the beginning, we feel like we can't do life without them. But do you know that eventually what happens is that when you get to that place of, okay, let me really think about this and really weigh this, that eventually what happens is that your logical side of your mind start to kick in instead of the emotional part of you leading you constantly, and then you start to weigh things. But in the beginning, it's so incredibly hard because you're thinking with your heart and you're not thinking with your head. As a matter of fact, when your head starts to think, your heart wins out and it pulls you down and it tells you, no, this is it. It's over. You're going to be this heartbroken for the rest of your life. Do you know that that is not true? That there is a choice. There is a choice that you have to think differently, to really answer the tough questions that sometimes we avoid. We don't look at those tough questions. We don't ask ourselves those tough questions. We think that it's horrible. I'm going to feel like this for the rest of my life. And that type of pain only lasts for a while. It only lasts for a while. But it's our choice whether we're going to work through it, really feel it out, right? Feel the pain, cry through it, have someone to talk through it in order to get to the other side, or we're going to shut down, try not to think about it, or live in it, knee deep in it for the rest of our lives. We have a choice. Let's talk about some of those choices. Really, what happens during those moments of grief is that we get to the place of, I really need to talk this through maybe with someone, or I really need to sort this out in my head. I suggest talking to someone because sometimes our perception, our perspective, it's been tainted, so we're not seeing things that perhaps other people have seen. There have been times where, I've talked to different women and they believe that they're never going to heal. And then when we start to talk through what happened, some of them realize that the breakup within the relationship or within the friendship was probably the best thing that has ever happened to them. It doesn't feel that way. Let's be honest. It doesn't feel good when you're first experiencing it. But after a while, when you start to think about it, when you start to weigh it, many, many times that relationship was not a long-term relationship. That relationship was maybe not even healthy for you. Maybe it was even toxic. That relationship, in most cases, when there are breakups, was not for you. It was not meant to be long-term. How do you know that? Well, you look at the signs. You look at the things that you dismiss because you love the person and you thought that, oh, it's okay. But that person didn't really have your best interest at heart. A person that loves you, that really truly loves you, is not going to fall out of love with you. They're going to try their best to do what they can do in order to stay in love with you. This is the thing. Love is a verb, and if we stop to do for the other, right, without expecting in return all of the time, because we're human, we expect something in return every once in a while, right? We would love for it to be something in return all the time. But if you look at the biblical truth of what love truly is, it means that I serve another. It means that I do for another. I'm always looking out for the best interest of the other. I'm not being selfish and saying, well, if I did this, I expect you to do this for me. No. And so if you have both people doing the same, we don't fall into that trap of, you didn't give me what I needed. Realistically, does that happen? No, because we're in a broken world. So we have to be very vocal to say to the person that we love, hey, I need this from you. I need this from you. They don't have crystal balls. They can't read your mind. And a lot of times I've heard women say, well, I already told him I needed that, or he should know. We've been together for so long. No, 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 it doesn't work that way. Usually we have to say it. We have to say something. But getting back into some of the things of, how do you weigh whether this relationship was really good or not? Were you giving way too much and the scales were up here versus down here? We think of being unequal, right? And there are times that we're in relationships where we're giving, 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 and the other person is not giving in return. Or we take and we start to make that person our world, and we become shattered when they're no longer in our world. Do you know that we shouldn't be depending on someone else to fulfill us? Do you know that nobody completes you in this world? The only person that can complete you is the Lord Jesus Christ. That is the only person. And yet we have that tendency of looking at a person and thinking, you have what I need. Do you know that there's no one on this earth that has everything that you need? It just doesn't happen. You were the one who broke that person's heart. And there's going to be a time in your life that either you've done that in the past, or you have to do it in the present, or you may do it in the future. Sometimes we think that everything is forever, and there are times that you're in friendships and relationships that only last for a short season. They're only there to teach us a lesson. They're only there to help us grow in certain areas. They're not meant to be forever. As much as we want marriages to be forever, sometimes that's not feasible, because you need one to work with the other. You need, that teamwork. And there are times that it just won't work because the other person doesn't want to budge. And the marriage might be in so much trouble, or there's abuse or something like that, right? And it's in so much trouble that you can't walk the rest of your life together. And a lot of women, I've heard them say, Roz, I feel so guilty. I feel so wrong. I feel like I should have done my marriage a little bit more. There are certain marriages that you can work until you die, and it won't be fixed because the other person doesn't want to work. And at a certain point, you're probably going to have to break that person's heart. They love you, but they don't know how to love you. They don't know your love language. They don't want to even bother to learn your love language. They don't want to put the work in that it requires for you guys to walk like this instead of like this or like this, there are a lot of times that there are certain relationships that are like all over the place. And God doesn't want that for you. But you know what? You got to give it 110% before you decide to walk away. Now, there are certain relationships and friendships that are extremely toxic. And in those cases, especially if it's going to affect you, right? I was going to say, especially if it affects you, it's going to affect you. it's going to affect you negatively, and it's going to hurt your heart. And there are times that there are people who love you, but they're so toxic that it doesn't make sense to continue walking the same path they are, because they keep hurting you. Now, your question is, what happens when it's family? That's a really, really tough call, and it's very, very personal. There have been times where I've seen where people had to walk away from their family, but before you do that, you need to really, really take inventory of yourself and ask yourself this question: am I contributing, or am I allowing the toxicity? A lot of times we don't have to walk away. We just have to put boundaries. And I know that I told you before, we probably should do a video about boundaries, because boundaries are so incredibly important. So ask yourself that. Is the walking away from the relationship, or perhaps you've already walked away and you're feeling the grief inside so deeply, was it necessary? And if it was, just continue to walk forward and do not look back. Despite going through the grief of losing someone, there's always that topic, or that mandate, I should say, of forgiveness. No matter what, whether they were the ones who walked away or you were the one who had to walk away, there's always the mandate that we should forgive. Now, I know that when you're feeling heartbroken, it's kind of hard for you to get to that place where you want to forgive. But you know what? Part of the healing process, especially when you're grieving, is to forgive the person that has hurt you, or to forgive yourself for hurting that person. So there's no way around this. If you want to heal, forgiveness has to be part of your journey. Because remember, we talked about what happens when you don't forgive. You become chained up, then you create your little box of prison. Because as long as you hold it against them, as long as you look at them with that heart, or that view, or that perception of you hurt me and I hate you because you hurt me, you're going to remain chained up. Now, some of you maybe have walked away because you knew that it wasn't going to work, and you actually loved the person, but you knew that it was not going to work. So every time you think about them, just pray for them. Ask God to bless them, and ask God to heal you and give you the strength to keep moving forward.